Hello everybody, and welcome back once again. I feel like I open every video with that, to the Resident Evil Resistance tier list videos. Today we are not only doing part 3 of the C tier, but we are wrapping up the C tier. Thank goodness, eh? Last time we went through a chunk of players. We went from SD Shogun to Apex Exterminator to Nana's Play to Self-Destruct to Legend Zombies to Bridget, a missing person, Firebird Fred, Mouse, Raccoon, Mike and more. And today we're going to go through the final chunk. And then I may also get onto the B tier as well, just a couple of them. But we'll see what it feels like when I get there. Anyway, kicking off the top of the C tier, we're now into like the final 20 players from the C tier, so I'd consider this the top tier of C tier. First of all, it's going to be Sadist Queen. Now, similar to Apex Exterminator, who I mentioned recently too, somebody who reached 999 early, definitely wasn't somebody who aged with the game well. They obviously stopped playing for one, and then like Apex Exterminator, Sadist Queen did come back, but you could tell that they were out of kilter, very rusty, and they just couldn't adapt as well to the new meta, the new equipment, the new items in the game. Sadist Queen definitely is somebody who was a resistance player who was more suited to the more archaic era of the game, but nevertheless I still give them credit. They were still one of the more notable names in the opening months. And I have to give them some credit for that. I can't just rate players based on, how they'd be in the modern day. It does hinder some players' placements, but, I'm not going to completely dictate the list with that and that only as criteria. Following Sadist Queen is DeMarco Polo, or DeMarco J. Polo. He's had a few names or variations, but the Marco Polo bit's virtually always been there. And by all means, he's a nice guy. I've played with him a few times. He was somebody I got on well with. And he's also a very solid Valerie, while also being potentially useful as Jan. I think if he improved, or rather, if he played a lot more with Jan, he'd improve with her. He's fine with Jan, but definitely has potential to do more. And then his Valerie is just like a Valerie that's between 6 out of 10 to 7 out of 10 at everything a Valerie should be. Like most of the Valeries I've mentioned up to this point, even if they're good, they normally have a bigger weakness. For example, they might not know when to push against infection mod. They'll be very timid. They won't push with the damage dealer, that type of thing. But Marco Polo is one of the first Vals I've mentioned so far who will push a decent degree against infection mod, for example. Again, is Marco Polo perfect against infection mod? No, he's not. Hence why he's lower, but he knows how to cover most bases as Valerie and does a solid job. Following him is another 999 player. Somebody who was very much in the limelight for the wrong reasons. They used to get quite a bit of negative press. Negative press, I'm acting like there's a daily resistance newspaper. But yeah, it's Omnicross / 999 with Jill, and when he was ranking her up to that level, he definitely had his controversial moments. He was not afraid of getting salty and, accusing people of duping or doing things or cheating when if he'd then play Terminal Spencer himself, you know, it would be fine. So, Omni always had a bit of a weird viewpoint for those sorts of things. As a player, he was good. Again, had a couple of glaring weaknesses, which isn't a nice thing as a Jill. You could tell he was one of these players that didn't really open his map much, because he'd be pressuring random parts of the map or going off on his own and not knowing what his teammates are doing at that moment. But yeah, he was a good player. Solid Jill, who used to be a Rocket main. He switched to Samurai Edge at one point, used that mostly, and then mostly rotated between the two. But yeah, he was okay. His Mastermind too, his Nikolai was okay. And yeah, he's obviously someone who's going to be competitive more often than not when you are Mastermind and you face him as his Jill. So all round, just, yeah, solid, but not spectacular either. After Omni, we have a friend of mine who, again, I did mention as an underrated player in my honest Q&As. He's not that well known in the Resistance scene. He's definitely more dedicated to Evil Dead nowadays, but a good player nonetheless, and would play all of the girl survivors to a good standard. It's amazing Cart, very solid Becca, good Valerie, underrated Jan, and a serviceable Jill. Amazing Cart, didn't play in sweaty teams. If he did, I think he'd be quite comfortably in the B tier. He was definitely good enough to be in that standing, but again, he's just one of these people who prefer to play in duo and trio, and that is fine. And when I did play with him in those settings, we often had fun, good matches. So yeah, only good memories from Amazing Cart. Still talk to him even now. Very nice guy. And in the C tier. After him, we have another player who's very similar to him, actually. Another player I mentioned in the underrated section of people in my Q&As, Patrick Hero. Now, he is of very similar quality to Amazing Cart, but kind of edges out Cart by the fact that I'd say his Tyrone and Valerie are good enough to override Cart's Jan and Becca. But it's very close. Ultimately, it's a tier list of 200 people plus. And if you're one place below somebody, there's like nothing in it. So, yeah. I'm sure when we get higher up the list and someone will be like, oh my god, I'm one space below this person, there'll be an absolute meltdown. But hey, what can you do? Anyway, yeah, Patrick Hero, good all-round player, very good with Tyrone, very good with Valerie, not much more to add. After him, we have a Scottish player. No, it's not Kai yet, it's Andy, or Andy, as he was better known. I mean, better known, that was literally his name. Anyway, Andy was a Martin main, a passionate Martin main. He played a couple years back now before transitioning over to Dead by Daylight. Definitely got a lot of hype for his Martin, at least in our smaller friend circle. And I do think he was a good player. He definitely loved his signal jammer a little bit too much, but he was very good with it. He was good with his flash as well. He honestly didn't face enough meta builds that often for me to say, yes, this guy's B tier. And when we did face meta builds, he was okay. I do think Andy is somebody that once the more modern meta set itself in place, he probably would have struggled the more common Nikolais became and stuff like that. But nevertheless, Andy was a good fun guy. He did dabble in Mastermind for a bit too, and he was alright in that regard. I think he ran Dog and Liquor and Net, and he did okay. So yeah, Miss you, Andy. Thank you for the fun matches we've had in the past, and a C-tier ranking for you, my friend. Following Andy is somebody who, honestly, back in the day when I just bumped into them or saw them around, I thought, they're okay, they're like a D-tier player. I did then have a couple of sessions with them, and they had improved greatly since I'd last seen them. It's Aqua. Back in the day when I saw them, Aqua died very, very often, and honestly just didn't have much patience or game surrounding intelligence of when to push, when to do this and that. But again, in the last few sessions I had with them, they improved a lot. I didn't know they were a good Samuel, but they are. Played a solid Valerie as well, and a couple of other characters they could play as well. No, Aqua improved a lot and has pushed up to a C tier, upper C tier because of that. After Aqua, we have somebody who I kind of ummed and ahed about in the tier list. At one point I had them lower C, and then when I went and looked over the list properly and was like, because at first I just dumped a lot of names into the tier list and they kind of just sit there. And then I kind of look over the list again, review it, think, should they go there? Or actually, they play this character well, they do this, I forgot about this, let's move them up. But with this person, it was kind of just a case of, they're a bit inconsistent, but they're also good. So it was always a hard balance. It's Alex Racer, who can play Valerie well, who has dabbled in Jan, who can play Tyrone a little bit, Sam a little bit. Yeah, Alex Racer is a solid player. Definitely best with Valerie. Good Valerie, by all means. Then Nikolai is actually underrated too. But the main reason I can't fully rate Alex Racer that little bit higher as well is because he blocks so many people. Like, it's quite insane. I have very long queues with him, and he's admitted he blocks basically everybody. So most of the time I can't get a fair assessment on if Alex Racer is super good or not, because we don't face many people good with him. But by all means, he knows what he's doing. His Nikolai is good, and he's a fun guy to be with in parties as well. After him, we have a guy who was a streamer of Resistance. Always got a decent amount of viewers and following when they did that. I do think in a way it kind of inflated their reputation as a player and how good they were just because they got some viewers. They were good by all means, but I wouldn't say that... I'd say that if they didn't stream, they wouldn't be rated quite as highly. It's NJ. ENDZEJ for people who don't know exactly how that's pronounced, myself included. But yeah, NJ, he was mainly a Jill player. He was a good Jill player. Definitely the best individual Jill I've mentioned thus far, and that's the reason they finish upper C tier. They didn't have a good time in the tournament matches for Mutated Nemi, but it is what it is. It kind of clarified their level of gameplay, which was good, but definitely exploited against like better, more meta builds. But again, he seemed a nice guy as well. He was nice to me, and he was a good player. Following him, we have another Jill main. This guy was somebody who I played with on and off, waxed and waned, and me and Duckman Sam had a couple of really fun sessions with him too. It's Jarlaxel. Good player, and kind of overlooked in a way. They played a solid Nikolai and a solid Net, I believe it was as well. Like, they did dabble in Mastermind, and as Survivor, they were solid. Again, I'd say they're one of these Jills which we're still not at the level where we're at Jills that are good enough to fill in ahead of another character in a really ultra sweaty match, but Jarlaxel was a good player, a good Jill, and you know, if you've got him on your team in quick match, you'll do well most of the time. So yeah. After him, we have somebody who didn't really get much exposure or credit, but they were always again, another overlooked Jan. There's so many good Jans that even really good Jans nowadays get overlooked, but ones like Amazing Car and so on, they aren't just underrated, they just don't get any attention at all. And obviously in a game where there's so many people who will play so many characters, it's always going to be tough to give everybody the credit they deserve. But this guy was a genuinely really solid Jan, even up to like the more modern builds. They could do good things against good builds, and it is OPG Stingray. Yeah, just as I said, really good Jan, and I've already done my explanation, so I'll leave it at that. But really good Jan, really nice guy as well. I was in parties with him a couple of times, and by all means, really nice. I remember there were 2 days in a row where I was just playing late at night, and I was just solo queuing, and then he bumped into me and just said, "Hey, do you want to join me?" And then me and him duo queued in a party for a couple of hours, and it was by all means a very good session, and he was a nice guy to be around. After him is a very consistent staple of the Survivor queue side. They are best with Valerie. They can also play other characters, but again, like a few people thus far, Valerie's their strongest. It's Angel Neris. Just a good, solid all-round player who has a lot of experience and will do well against most builds in the game. A proper upper C tier pick. I don't think there was really any other place I would put him. Just somebody who you'd want in this region of the list, you know. If you had them on your team, you're like, cool, that's a good player, I'm happy. After him, we have Samuel. Now, it does sound like I'm just saying Samuel a bit weirdly, but no, the person who played with Celestial all the time. Good player, and yeah, again, if they played in teams more often, they probably would have been able to showcase their ability more. I certainly knew less about Samuel than I did Celestial. So again, it's one of these things where if I saw more footage of them, I would probably put them higher. For now, it's just upper C tier. After them, we have a Nikolai, who I only saw a handful of times, but by all means they were good. Hard Rock Witch. Now, I believe they may have been from PC, yeah? I think that was the case. Played against them a couple of times on PS for a short period of time, and they were good. Good player. Again, they'd give you more 20s than the best Nikolais, but their overall knowledge of how to cycle and do the fundamentals of Nikolai were in place, were good, were grounded, and were proper. After Hard Rock Witch, we have somebody who I labelled as one of the worst Terminal Spencers. Poland Hunter. Now, thankfully, Mastermind wasn't their only dedication to this game, because otherwise Poland Hunter would be, well, no, not challenging Jametheus, that's a bit unfair. But they wouldn't be upper C tier, that's the point. Poland Hunter was a very solid Becker, was a very solid January. Those two were his main two, and he was really solid with both of them. he kind of faded into obscurity a little bit at some point. Like, there was one time where he'd play often and he was doing a lot, like you'd see him playing teams daily, and he'd do well for himself. He'd give a good account of himself. He knew how to play Becca and Jan to a good standard. And then he kind of just got sucked into Mastermind, and then he kind of just dropped off completely. So if he played consistently, maybe he could have sneaked into the B tier. He was good enough for that on his day, but he was also a bit too, here and there for me to be like, yeah, I'm convinced that you're good enough for B tier. Like, he showed flashes and enough to be that standard, but yeah, again, I just needed more evidence over more time to push him higher. After him is a high-ranked Daniel main who kind of just dropped off the face of the earth at one point, but he streamed a lot, he complained a lot, but he was always fun to play against. It's the Bongo. He played, I believe it was, what's it called? Unnatural Selection, Daniel, Equilibrium mod, all that stuff. And he was one of the better Daniel players. He was very aggressive. He would jump in and out of zombies, was very flexible and on the bounce with things. He could improvise well. And yeah, you'd always have to sweat properly to beat him. And if you had even one player on your team who wasn't quite as knowledgeable of the game as you had to be, then he would absolutely punish you. But yeah, good Mastermind, good Daniel. Bit of a whining baby, but hey, at the end of the day, as a player, good enough for upper C tier. After him is Equatorianos. Just an all-round good player here. I did initially have them B tier, and did drop them down to C in the end. Did overrate them ever so slightly, but upper C tier is nothing to be sniffed at. And to be honest, there's not much to say about Equatorianos. He was another one of these VSG Fever type players who, just Mr. Dependable without having too many wow moments or a massive X factor about them. After them is, it's an infamous Nikolai, but it's a Nikolai who I think was good. He had the tools to be much better if he just would stay focused. As I said before, like, a good portion of playing Nikolai is about keeping your head, doing the right things at the right time, but also making sure you don't lose your head. It's Modem. Now, Modem would rage quit all the time. He blocked loads of people. But despite his flaws and his, infamous side, yeah, I'd say he was a good player. Good Nikolai. Again, didn't stop me wanting to meme on him or anything, but yeah, he definitely was better than most Nikolais, and it was just, again, anytime a match got tough, he just backed out. He rage quit, he dipped. And I do think if he was actually dedicated, then he could have been one of the better Nikolais. He never would have been upper tier, but he could have scraped, around the better Nikolai's tier. It's not very specific, but you get what I mean. He would have been feared by most people, or people would have been like, it's a good Nikolai. But sadly, from what we got, it was just hints of potential without fully committing to it. So he finishes here when he could have been B tier. After him is Caribou Broth. I think he may have played more than just Tyrone, but I mostly knew him for Tyrone. He was a good Tyrone. I initially had him B tier, then realised, that's a little bit too high, because I did find a few clips and I did realise, he wasn't quite as solid a Tyrone as I remember, but nevertheless, still a good player. Definitely a personality in parties as well, and finishes in the, what are we at now, top 4, 5 of the C tier. Up next is Jennan, or Jennan OX. Really good player. Has improved a lot, to be honest. They were always solid, but I played with them recently in a team with Wolfstack, and yeah, it just reminded me of how good they are. Good Valerie, can play Jan. Those are the main two. And again, it's just another case of this tier list at the moment, this part of the tier list kind of feels like who's a better Val than the last one, really. But Jennan, really good Valerie, does her job to a good standard. And yeah, I'd push even higher if I saw her, you know, in more sweaty matches more often so I could make a full judgment. But in the occasions I've played with them and been against good masterminds, they haven't ever let the team down, so a good solid placement. Next up is the Wraith, a long retired Jan main. There was a time where you'd see the Wraith, Ninja, Bam, and just another Jan main in general, all on the same team. I remember I played with them 3 in a custom, and it was like the Jan mains custom back then. I'd say the Wraith was the weakest of like the bigger name Jans, because when I first played with Bam and Ninja and him and Conqueror and the guys, you know, everybody would take their turns at Jan. Like sometimes Bam would be on Jan, then Ninja would, then Kara would, then Wraith would, and out of that group, Wraith did have the most weaknesses. He didn't blind spot as much, he wasn't quite as patient with his pushing, he wasn't always aware when a shield was up behind him or when a mastermind had wiggled. But again, this is in comparison to like Bam and Ninja, who are really good Jans, and Wraith was a really good Jan as well, just not as good as the other guys, and that's not a bad thing, it's just what I'm comparing him to. First thing that comes to my mind in that regard. But yeah, by all means, still a really solid player. Talked to him a few times in voice chat, seemed a nice guy, and I had fun matches with him, so I cannot complain. Up next is honestly someone I can't say much about. They played with Pep, they played with Dom in the more olden times, and I faced them a couple of times myself. When I did face them, they definitely didn't overly impress me compared to what I expected when I saw like Pep and them on the team. But again, I'm sure they were better back in the day. For now, I'm just going to have to settle with a top of C tier rank because I want to include them, but I can't make the firmest call. It's Twisted Gamer. Again, I've explained myself already in regards to this, and yeah, by all means, I'm sure they were probably good enough to be balanced out to mid-B tier overall, but again, there's just not enough footage for me to trawl through, and make a fair judgment, so it's one of those where I always want to include these older players who are more notable, but at the same time, it's difficult for me to make an assessment because, yeah, I was somebody who didn't play in the more team-based era in the olden days, so yeah, just is what it is. And into the final two of the C tier, we have Mutated Nemi. He's a bit like Modem, really. I think he's better than people give him credit for, but at the same time, did have big weaknesses in his game. I mean, Modem's was more to do with like attitude and just not being patient or dedicated enough to, you know, weather the hard moments and push through. He was good, mutated Nemi, but he definitely gave away too many 20s. He was very greedy with his gameplay at times, and yeah, he would always resort to, they cheated, they did this, door spray's not allowed. It's like, oh god. Again, just one of those players who was good, but always had something to whine about, and yeah. Also, he never gave me my PSN gift card, so demoted to D tier. And finishing off the C tier is G Money Streets. I would say he isn't quite given enough credit for his terminal Spencer. He's one of the better ones, but having said that, he also has some pretty hefty losses on his CV. He's definitely a better terminal Spencer than he is Nikolai. Nikolai, nothing to write home about at all. And he does cheat as well. I have seen him dupe plenty of times in quick match when I've had him on my team as Survivor. I think he did it every time he was on my team as Survivor, so not much to really say there to back up his cause. But yeah, if you want to see me on his YouTube, he made a new YouTube and I'm his only video. As a player, he's the top of C tier, so well done. Anyway, 31 minutes in, I don't think I'll start with the B tier today. That will be very interesting to go through, believe me. That's when it really starts to get more spicy, because the B tier is where some people are going to be like, wow, how is that player in B tier? That's crazy. Or, oh yeah, they're a good player. They're a B tier player for sure. Or, oh, I forgot about them. Like, believe me, none of the B tier videos are going to be letdowns. They're all going to be very interesting, and they're going to be very long as well. The B tier is nearly as long as the C tier, so yeah, that'll come to you within a few days. But until then, digest the C tier, the remainder of the C tier in this video, and let me know your opinions below. I have been your Resident Evil CEO, as some people call me incredibly, N Western 4, and I will see you soon, and until then, have a lovely day.